The house is silent, and rain taps softly against the window. He eats cold pasta, listens to his wife's voice, and suddenly hears another man's name, spoken with a tenderness he hasn't felt in years. No shouting, no scenes, just silence, and the sound of a life quietly unraveling. But he doesn't scream. He smiles, because if she can lie with such grace, he can destroy with equal elegance. Beneath the polite smile, the morning coffee, the casual questions, a trap is already being laid. While they still think they're playing by their own rules, he's writing a new script, one where the traitors applaud their own downfall, never realizing who directed the show. Hello, my dear friend. Before you start watching this video, I have a small request for you. Please check the description and subscribe to my friend's channel. He'll really appreciate it. Now let's get started. The soft blue light from Adrian Westfall's monitor cast long shadows across his fatigued face as he typed what would be the last email of his night. The sound of rain tapping gently against the office windows synchronized with the rhythmic clacking of his fingers on the keyboard. It was 10 p.m. again, the third time this week. He rubbed his eyes, the weight of exhaustion stinging. The software build was almost complete, edging closer to yet another success in a long line of triumphs. One rule had always guided Adrian: go all in or don't bother at all. It had served him well over the years, both professionally and personally. At least, it had until recently. You heading out? Jasper's voice cut through the quiet, calling from the doorway. Adrian, bag slung over his shoulder, was already in the process of shutting down his workstation. Yeah, just finished up, he replied with a nod, closing his laptop. Another long night added to the tally. Alyssa was probably getting accustomed to the emptiness at the dinner table by now. She understands, Adrian muttered under his breath, though doubt lingered in his voice, barely perceptible. As he drove home, the rain and the occasional squeak of the wipers were the only sounds breaking the stillness. His thoughts inevitably turned to Alyssa. Lately, things had shifted in subtle ways, too small to be tangible, but undeniable. Her smile now held a hint of strain, girls' nights had become more frequent, and there was a new, barely perceptible distance between them. Nothing he could put his finger on, nothing that could be proven, just an instinct. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway, and her car was missing. Another night out. Inside, the silence pressed against him like an oppressive weight. He checked his phone. No messages. Opening the fridge, he found a plate of pasta covered in plastic wrap, a yellow post-it note stuck to the top. Working late, then drinks with Nina. Don't wait up. XO. The handwriting was rushed, the XO tacked on like an afterthought. He heated the food and sat down alone at the kitchen island, scrolling through work emails as he ate. His phone buzzed. A voicemail from Alyssa. Expecting a casual update or a half-hearted apology, Adrian tapped play. But what he heard was anything but typical. A voice, sultry and unfamiliar, filled the room. Caleb, baby. The words hit him like a punch. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Adrian's working late again, so we'll have the afternoon to ourselves. I miss your hands. The message cut off abruptly. Wrong recipient, wrong number. But the truth was clear. He listened again, then once more. Calm, measured, he saved the voicemail. His face remained still, though beneath the surface, turmoil began to stir. Placing the phone on the counter, he treated it like a ticking time bomb. He resumed eating, but now every bite was flavorless. Once he was done, he washed the dish, dried it, and placed it back in the cabinet. Order maintained, even amidst the chaos. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows of their darkened home. Adrian made his way to the living room, staring into the soaking night. His life, once so carefully constructed on a foundation of reliability and trust, now seemed cracked, the fault lines too obvious to ignore. His reflection in the window was colder, more focused. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about preserving his dignity, about ensuring that actions had consequences. Adrian Westfall didn't allow things to fall apart. He fixed them, or, when necessary, he dismantled them piece by piece. Morning arrived, and he moved through his usual routine with mechanical precision, brewing his coffee with practiced hands. Alyssa walked in, her energy too bright, her tone too cheerful. Her damp hair clung to her shoulders, her smile exaggerated. "Morning," she said brightly, planting a quick kiss on his cheek. "Sleep okay?" "Fine," Adrian replied, sliding a mug across the island toward her. He took a sip of his own coffee, observing her every movement, every shift in her demeanor. She avoided making eye contact for more than a second. "How was your night out with Nina?" "Great, just what I needed," she replied, digging through her purse. "We checked out that new wine bar on Jefferson." Adrian raised an eyebrow. "That's a nice place." "You've been?" she asked, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Client dinner. Last month," he lied smoothly. In reality, he had never set foot in that wine bar, but her startled reaction said it all. That place had closed 3 months ago. "We should go sometime," he suggested casually. "Absolutely," she agreed too quickly, her attention turning back to her purse. "Found it." She pulled out a tube of lip balm like a victory trophy, a feeble shield against his gaze. Adrian took another sip of his coffee, his thoughts drifting back to the voicemail. Caleb. The name had echoed in his mind all night. It could have been anyone, he told himself. There was nothing definitive. But Adrian didn't believe in coincidences. Alyssa glanced at her watch. "I've got to go. Meeting a client for brunch." On a Saturday. Another lie, delivered effortlessly. And Adrian, silent as always, simply watched her leave. "Weekend meetings? That's some serious dedication," he remarked, noting the tightness in Alyssa's laugh. "It's that kind of commitment that keeps the big paychecks rolling in." She grabbed her bag and keys, walking toward the door, leaving behind a trail of a new, unfamiliar fragrance that was far removed from her usual scent. "Don't wait up for me," she called over her shoulder. "Dinner could take a while." After she left, Adrian stood alone in the quiet kitchen. He placed his mug in the dishwasher, methodically wiping down the counters, even erasing the invisible crumbs. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Wesley Prentice, one of their closest friends. "Hey man, are we still on for coffee?" Adrian responded quickly, confirming their plans. Perhaps Wesley had noticed something during their last coffee outing. When Adrian arrived at the cafe, Wesley was already seated, 2 cups of coffee awaiting him. Wesley stood, greeting Adrian with a firm handshake that transformed into a brief hug. "You look like you've had a rough one," Wesley remarked, pushing one of the cups toward Adrian. "It's been a long week, just work," Adrian answered. The silence between them lingered. Adrian let out a deep breath. "How about you?" Wesley hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "I've been on the fence about telling you. I saw Alyssa last week down in the Pearl District." Adrian kept his face neutral. "She shops there sometimes." But Wesley's voice dropped lower. "She wasn't shopping. She was with some guy at River and Bistro. They were close." Adrian remained calm. "What did he look like?" "Tall, dark hair, built like he spends a lot of time in the gym," Wesley replied. A grimace crossed Wesley's face as he briefly touched the table. "I slipped out before they saw me." Adrian nodded slowly, piecing things together. "Thanks for letting me know. What are you going to do about it?" Adrian took a slow sip of his coffee. "Nothing for now. I need more information." Wesley looked at him, narrowing his eyes with concern. "You're way too calm about this. If it were Nina—" Adrian interrupted, his voice firm. "I don't make moves without all the facts." Wesley leaned back, respect and worry mixing in his expression. "Whatever you need, I've got your back." They shifted to lighter subjects, like the Blazers' playoff chances, Wesley's new work project, and the unseasonably rainy spring. but the tension between them never fully dissipated. The weight of the knowledge that Adrian's life, meticulously constructed, was beginning to show cracks. Outside, as they parted ways, Wesley clapped Adrian on the shoulder. "Don't let this take over your life, man. Whatever's going on, get ahead of it before it gets ahead of you." Adrian nodded, grateful for his friend's concern. "I will." As he walked to his car, his mind raced. Alyssa's possible betrayal, the mystery man, the growing fractures in their marriage, like ice splintering under the first signs of spring warmth. Adrian didn't react with anger. He didn't lash out. He simply started planning. By Sunday afternoon, the clouds had cleared, and the sun poured down, drawing people outside. Adrian sat across from Nina at a sidewalk cafe, watching people stroll by with ice cream cones and shopping bags. Alyssa was buried in work, so Adrian had the chance to meet with Nina without arousing suspicion. Nina stirred her iced tea, fidgeting a bit. "It's nice to do this. We don't grab lunch like this enough." "No, we don't," Adrian agreed, his tone casual, though his eyes never stopped scanning. "Alyssa's been swamped lately." "Work's crazy for everyone right now," Nina responded quickly. "That's what she tells me," Adrian said, taking a bite of his sandwich. "Late nights, weekend meetings." Nina's fingers tightened around her glass. "Agency life and girls' nights, you know how it goes." Adrian kept his tone light. "She mentioned you two tried that new wine bar on Jefferson the other night." Nina's face flickered with confusion before she caught herself. "Jefferson? No, we went to—" She stopped mid-sentence, realizing she'd made a mistake. "I mean, yes, it was nice." Adrian leaned in slightly. "Nina, how long have we known each other? 8 years?" She nodded, avoiding his gaze. "So let's not pretend with each other," Adrian said, his voice steady but his eyes hardening. "When was the last time you two actually had a girls' night out?" Nina looked down, her silence stretching long. "Adrian, I don't want to get caught in the middle of this." "You already are," Adrian replied, his voice unwavering. She finally met his eyes, uncertainty written all over her face. "About a month ago, we had dinner, but she left early, said there was a client emergency." "And you bought that?" Adrian's question hung between them, and Nina's silence gave him all the answer he needed. "Do you know who he is?" Adrian asked, his calm mask hiding the chaos inside him. Nina hesitated before speaking. "I've only heard her mention the name once. Caleb. That's all I know." Nina lowered her voice to a barely audible level, her words barely a whisper. She never gave specifics, likely sensing I wouldn't handle them well. Adrian took in her words without flinching, though there was a subtle change in his demeanor, as if something inside him shifted and settled. "Do you know Caleb's last name?" "I swear I don't." Nina's hand shot across the table, gripping his. "Adrian, I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. I thought it would resolve itself." Adrian gently withdrew his hand, not unkindly, but firmly. "We both know Alyssa's not like that," he said. Nina's eyes filled with tears. "What do you plan to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Adrian's answer was steady. "That depends on what else comes to light." He motioned for the check, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate your honesty." "Please, Adrian," Nina pleaded. "Don't let her know we talked. She'll figure it out. She'll know it was me." Adrian regarded her calmly. "You need to figure out where your loyalties lie, Nina, and resolve that." On his drive home, Adrian's thoughts ran with practiced calm through the confirmations he had just received. His wife was involved with someone named Caleb. Still no last name, but the outline was beginning to take shape. Once at home, Adrian retreated to his study, a space Alyssa rarely ventured into. He powered up his laptop and began his investigation with cold precision. No hired investigators, no explosive confrontations, just a careful, methodical search. He dug through their credit card statements, finding charges at hotels and restaurants that suspiciously matched nights when Alyssa had claimed to be working late or meeting friends. He then examined their shared digital calendar, looking for any patterns in her absences. And then he remembered the gym. Alyssa had pushed for a membership at the exclusive downtown fitness center last year. Adrian had only gone a few times, but enough to get familiar with the staff and some of the regulars. He opened the gym's website and browsed through the profiles of the trainers. There, in front of him, was Caleb Lawson, fit, dark-haired, with a confident smile, exactly as Wesley had described him. Adrian leaned back, the full picture starting to take shape. A quick search of Caleb revealed more, an online presence and, more telling, a wedding announcement from 5 years earlier. Caleb was married to Mira Lawson, the owner of an art gallery in the Pearl District. Both of them were unfaithful. The irony wasn't lost on Adrian. It was a grim symmetry. He closed his laptop, a cold clarity settling in his chest. He wasn't after a confrontation, no wild accusations, no heated arguments. This would require precision, patience, and careful strategy. His thoughts turned to Mira Lawson. Did she know, or was she another pawn in this tangled affair, or perhaps an unexpected ally? That evening, the rain returned, tapping softly against the windows as Adrian sat alone in the dim living room. When Alyssa walked in after 9, her damp hair clinging to her shoulders, she flinched at the sight of him. "You scared me," she said, laughing nervously. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" Adrian flicked on the lamp beside him. "Just thinking. About work. About loyalty," he murmured. "What it really means." A flicker of something crossed Alyssa's face. Was it anxiety? Guilt? It was gone almost instantly, replaced by a forced yawn. Pretty deep thoughts for a Sunday night. "I'm exhausted. You coming to bed?" Adrian nodded slightly. She hesitated, then leaned in to kiss his forehead. "Don't stay up too late." Once she left, he remained where he was, listening to the rain. The crack in his world had turned into an overwhelming divide. But unlike most, he wouldn't leap into it blindly. He would build a bridge, constructed from facts, timing, and control. And when it was complete, he would cross it, step by careful step, deliberately, with unwavering resolve. The Lawson Gallery wasn't the largest or most avant-garde space in Portland's Pearl District, but it had earned a quiet reputation for thoughtful, carefully curated exhibitions. Adrian lingered outside, observing as well-dressed guests arrived and departed from the evening's opening. Through the expansive windows, he saw them mingling, wine glasses in hand, drifting through vibrant splashes of color on pristine white walls. Mira Lawson moved gracefully among them, tall, poised, with her dark hair swept into a sleek twist. From Adrian's research, he knew she was 39, just a few years older than Alyssa. But even from a distance, her presence had a sharper, more contained energy. Adrian straightened his tie before stepping inside, accepting a glass of wine from a passing server. He moved slowly through the gallery, pausing to take in the artwork. The paintings were intense, bold colors and dynamic lines that seemed to capture barely controlled turmoil. "First time here?" a voice asked. Adrian turned to see Mira Lawson standing beside him, a polite smile on her face. Up close, he noticed the sharpness in her gaze and the quiet tension in her posture. "Yes," he replied. "The artwork is striking." "Thank you," she said. "This exhibition is about transformation through disruption." She gestured toward a nearby painting, a serene landscape torn apart by jagged streaks of red. The artist explores how sudden, violent changes can force us to view the world differently. Adrian nodded slightly. "Fitting," he murmured. "Sometimes, the only way to move forward is to take a step back." There was something about the way he spoke that caused her to listen more closely. "Do you have an interest in collecting art?" Mr. Westfall? Adrian Westfall?" she inquired. "Not really," he responded. "I simply admire it. But this particular series resonates with me." He moved toward another painting, this one a fractured mirror that scattered distorted reflections in every direction. "Do you think people resist these fractures, even when they can't be avoided?" he asked. Mira's smile softened, the confident expression of a gallery owner giving way to a more genuine look. "People tend to cling to comforting illusions until reality forces them to confront the truth," she replied. She extended her hand to him. "Mira Lawson." "This is my space," she said. Adrian shook her hand, noting the firm, confident grip. "You've created something exceptional here." "Your husband must be proud," he remarked. For just a moment, a fleeting look crossed her face, barely noticeable. "Caleb supports me." "In his own way," she said, her gaze sweeping over the mingling crowd in the gallery. "And you, Mr. Westfall, came here alone tonight?" "Adrian, please," he answered. "Yes, I'm on my own." "My wife had other obligations this evening," he added. "As did my husband," Mira replied with a slight tightening of her smile. "His personal training runs late, apparently." The silence between them was filled with an unspoken understanding, a shared recognition of something unaddressed. Adrian's attention shifted to a smaller piece in the corner. Two figures, bound together yet stretching apart, connected only by a thin red thread. "This one. It carries a lot of meaning," he said. Mira joined him by the artwork. The artist called it Betrayal's Thread. That's a powerful title. "Betrayal leaves marks that never truly disappear," she replied, her voice softening. "It rewrites your story, without your consent." Adrian turned to face her fully. Some stories, maybe, should be rewritten. Their gazes locked, an unspoken understanding passing between them in that moment. No blame, no accusations, just a mutual recognition of parallel suffering. "Would you like to learn more about the artist's technique?" she asked, her professional demeanor returning as more guests approached. "I'd like that," he answered with a nod. Understanding the method gives depth to the meaning. Together, they wandered through the gallery, discussing the techniques and themes behind the artwork. But in truth, their conversation was laced with deeper reflections on trust, betrayal, and the consequences of both. By the time Adrian left an hour later, there had been no direct mention of Alyssa or Caleb, and yet everything had been conveyed. Outside, in the cool night air, Adrian paused for a moment to glance back at the gallery window. Mira stood there, watching him. He gave a small, deliberate nod, an acknowledgement, and perhaps a silent vow. She returned the gesture before turning back to her guests. A first step had been taken. It wasn't romantic, but it was strategic, even powerful. A shared wound, born of betrayal, now quietly bonded them in an unspoken alliance. As Adrian drove home, the weight of his wedding ring felt heavier than it had in weeks. For the first time in a long time, he could see a way forward. The cafe was tucked between a used bookstore and a vintage boutique, unobtrusive, far from the places they typically frequented. Adrian arrived early, choosing a secluded table with a clear view of the door. He ordered his coffee, black, and mentally rehearsed the words he needed to say. Mira arrived exactly on time. Her outfit, simple black turtleneck and tailored trousers, spoke more of control and calm than secrecy. She spotted him immediately and walked over with deliberate steps. "Thank you for coming," Adrian greeted her, standing to meet her. She settled into the seat across from him. "Your message was intriguing." Mutual interests to discuss. Very vague, but effective. A server approached and Mira ordered an Americano. Once they were alone again, she leaned forward slightly. "Let's skip the formalities, Mr. Westfall. Why are we really meeting?" Adrian met her gaze. "I believe our spouses are having an affair." Her face remained composed, though the smallest tightening around her eyes betrayed her reaction. What evidence do you have? She asked. More than one thing, he replied. He slid his phone across the table, already open to a document. Text messages between my wife's number and one registered to your husband. Dates, times, locations. He paused. There's also a voicemail intended for him, but it came to me. Mira scanned the screen, her expression unchanged, but her grip on her coffee cup tightened ever so slightly. How long have you known? She asked quietly. With certainty? 2 weeks, but I've suspected for longer. Adrian studied her closely. And you? He asked. Mira let out a bitter laugh. Women usually sense it first. But proof? That's a different battle. She handed the phone back to him. There were hotel charges, unexplained absences, the classic signs. And yet, you haven't confronted him? Adrian asked. What's the point? She replied with a shrug. He'd just deny it. Make promises. You know how it goes. Her eyes darkened a little, the weight of everything unspoken hanging heavily between them. You didn't bring me here to discuss our failing marriages, Mira stated plainly. Adrian gave a subtle nod, appreciating her directness. I'm here with a proposal, he began, not to revisit old wounds, that's been done, but for something much more satisfying. Retribution. Mira raised an eyebrow. Justice, Adrian clarified, on our terms, out in the open, clear and undeniable. As their coffees were placed before them, Mira stirred hers thoughtfully, reflecting on his words. What exactly are you suggesting? They've stolen our stories without our consent, Adrian replied. I plan to take mine back. And I thought you might want to do the same. And how do you plan on doing that? Mira inquired. By making a scene? That's not how I do things. Neither is it my way, Adrian answered calmly. I'm thinking of something more refined. He leaned forward. They pride themselves on being covert, hiding right under our noses. What if we use that against them? Mira's interest piqued. Go on. I've been paying attention, Adrian continued. Alyssa meets Caleb every Friday at different restaurants. She calls them business dinners. I've gathered enough intel to predict their next spot. And then what? Mira pressed. We show up where they are, Adrian said. Let them see us. Together. Let the doubt eat at them. And when the moment is right, we present the evidence. Mira's expression turned wary. What evidence? Far more than I've shown you before, Adrian said, his tone unwavering. Financial records, photos from their private booth at River and Bistro. Everything. Mira paused, taking in his words. Why not confront them privately? Because they've ridiculed us behind closed doors for long enough, Adrian replied. Some betrayals need to be brought into the light. They deserve to be exposed. She regarded him with a sharper gaze. You're not what I expected, Adrian Westfall. You seem so measured. I believe in structure, he confessed, and accountability. This isn't just about catching them in the act, is it? She asked. There's something bigger you're after. Adrian's face darkened. I want them to lose what we've lost. Their stability, their pretense, their faith in the lie. Mira took a deliberate sip of her coffee, her thoughts shifting. If we proceed with this, and I'm not committing just yet, we'll need ground rules. No violence, no outbursts that make us seem unstable. Agreed, Adrian said. This is about precision, controlled and impactful. And when it's over? She asked. What happens next? Adrian hadn't fully thought that through. That will be your call. For me, the next step is clear. I've already spoken with a divorce attorney. Mira nodded slightly. Then I'll need to see everything. All the files, every detail. If I'm going to make this decision, I need to be certain. Adrian reached into his jacket and placed a sleek USB drive on the table. It's all here. Review it thoroughly. She slipped the drive into her bag. I'll call you tomorrow with my decision. They finished their drinks in silence, a quiet camaraderie forming between them. Two people brought together by shared betrayal. As they stood to leave, Mira paused. "Why me?" she asked. "You could have handled this on your own." Adrian met her gaze. "Two reasons. First, you deserve the truth. Second, justice means more when it's witnessed by someone who understands why it matters." Mira considered this for a moment before extending her hand. "Tomorrow, then." Adrian took her hand. "Tomorrow." They exited into the afternoon, appearing to any onlooker like two professionals wrapping up a business meeting. But beneath their composed facades, a storm was quietly brewing. Later, Adrian sat at his desk, phone pressed to his ear. Once again, Alyssa's voicemail picked up. This was the third time that day. He hung up without leaving a message and noted the time, 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. She should have been at the office. His gaze shifted to the computer screen, where an email from Mira Lawson awaited. Reviewed the files. "We need to talk." "Tonight?" He responded right away. "Yes." "Name the place." Then, as he returned to his work, he adjusted his estimate of Alyssa's next dinner location based on her habits. 3 upscale venues in downtown Portland matched the pattern. He just needed confirmation. At that moment his phone buzzed. A message from Wesley. "Tonight, drinks. I can't make it tonight. How about tomorrow?" "Tomorrow's good. Is everything all right?" Even through the brevity of the text, Wesley's concern was clear. "Getting there," Adrian replied, keeping it vague. He checked his watch before grabbing the phone on his desk, dialing the first restaurant on his list. "Bellamy's, good afternoon. How can I assist you?" The hostess's voice was polished. "I'm calling to confirm a reservation for Friday evening. It should be under Westfall or possibly Lawson." "Let me check that for you." There was a moment of silence. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see either of those names for Friday." "Thanks anyway," Adrian said before ending the call and moving to the next name on his list. The second attempt ended in the same disappointment, but when he dialed Riviera, the response was different. "Yes, Mr. Lawson has a reservation for 2 at 8 p.m. The hostess's cheerful tone was unmistakable. "Window table as requested." "Perfect. Thank you," Adrian replied, hanging up. The confirmation felt like a weight settling in his chest, cold and calculated. The target was set. Now he needed to arrange the stage. He brought up Lauren Camden's contact information, the owner of Riviera. 2 years ago, he'd assisted her with a high-stakes legal battle over a software licensing issue. She'd promised to return the favor. That time had arrived. He dialed her direct line, the number that wasn't available to the public. "Adrian Westfall." Lauren's voice was warm. "It's been a while. How can I help?" "Hi, Lauren. I'm calling in that favor you offered me." There was a pause on the other end. "I'm listening." "I need a reservation for 2 this Friday at 8 p.m., the same time as another group already booked. I need a specific table. Friday's packed, but for you, I'll find a way." "Which table are you after?" "The one next to the window reserved under Lawson." Her voice shifted, a note of seriousness entering. "Adrian, this sounds sensitive." "It is," he replied calmly. "I need to handle something. Quietly, but in a public place." "Wesley, it disrupt the restaurant?" "No scenes, no drama, just a conversation that needs to happen in the right environment. I promise it will be respectful." Lauren sighed softly. "You were there when my business was on the brink of collapse. I haven't forgotten." "Thanks, Lauren. One more thing. I'll likely need subtle assistance from your staff during the evening." "What kind of help do you need?" Adrian outlined the plan. After a moment of silence, Lauren spoke again. "Unusual request, but doable. I'm assuming your reasons are solid?" "The best kind." "Then it's settled. I'll text you the confirmation and the logistics." Adrian leaned back in his chair, the pieces clicking into place. The venue was locked down. Now, he needed a partner for the next step. Later that evening, Adrian met Mira at a quiet Italian restaurant, away from their usual circles. They settled into a corner booth, speaking softly, despite the empty space around them. "The evidence is airtight," Mira said without preamble. "I'm in." Adrian nodded. "They have a reservation at Riviera, Friday at 8. We'll sit at the table next to theirs." "You've been busy," Mira said, a hint of admiration in her gaze. "What's the plan once we're seated?" "We act like any normal dinner companions, two colleagues having a meal. We let them see us. That alone will unsettle them. Maybe they'll leave." "I doubt it," Adrian replied. "Alyssa avoids conflict. She'll pretend everything's fine. Caleb will follow her lead." Mira thought for a moment. "So then what?" Adrian laid out the rest of the plan. She listened, her expression shifting from skepticism to reluctant approval. "That's ruthlessly efficient," she said when he finished. "But timing has to be perfect. That's why I need your full commitment. Once we start, there's no turning back." Mira took a sip of her wine, studying him. "You're not what people expect from a betrayed husband. No rage, no rash decisions. Anger is messy. Precision works." "To precision, then." Mira raised her glass. "And to justice." They clinked glasses, sealing their pact under the soft glow of candlelight. As their meal wound down and their plates were cleared, Mira asked the question that Adrian had known was coming. "Do you think they love each other?" Adrian paused for a moment before replying. "Does it even matter?" "Probably not," Mira answered softly. Adrian pondered aloud. "I wonder what kind of story they tell themselves to fall asleep each night." He continued, "People spin these elaborate fabrications to justify their worst decisions." A pause followed as he added, "Our task is to dismantle those lies." Mira nodded resolutely, a determined spark flashing in her eyes. "Friday, then," she said firmly. "I should give you a heads up," she added, with a subtle, sharp smile. "I'm bringing some extra ammunition to this meeting." The brief smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're not the only one with evidence. Caleb has made other mistakes, ones that have nothing to do with the affair." Adrian raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Want to share any specifics?" She shook her head slightly, rising from her chair. "Let's leave a few surprises for Friday," she said, a note of finality in her voice. "I'll see you at the Riviera. 7:30. Make sure you're ready to remember every detail." As she walked away, Adrian regarded her with a flicker of respect. She had taken the pain, the betrayal, and turned it into something sharp and purposeful. More than he had anticipated, she shared his core values: order, responsibility, consequences. The lines had been drawn, their alliance had solidified. All that was left was waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment seemed to draw nearer as Adrian's younger brother, Elliot, appeared in the doorway of Adrian's home office, arms casually crossed over his chest. At 35, Elliot shared Adrian's height and build, though where Adrian carried himself with a quiet intensity, Elliot exuded a laid-back charm that concealed a sharp mind. "You sure about this?" Elliot asked, idly spinning a small microphone in his hand. "It feels like overkill," Adrian replied, continuing to sift through the files spread across his desk. "It's a precaution," Adrian explained, his focus never leaving the papers in front of him. "I need everything recorded. Everything, especially with Mira and this dinner setup. It all needs to be documented." Elliot slowly shook his head, disbelief flickering in his expression. "Why not just confront Alyssa directly, or file for divorce and walk away?" Adrian paused and locked eyes with his brother. "This isn't just about ending a relationship. It's about bringing the truth to light, making sure people are held accountable." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "So, it's about revenge?" Adrian's voice was cold and steady. "It's about justice. Alyssa and Caleb didn't just cross a line. They've woven a tangled web of lies, manipulated trust for their own gain. That can't go unanswered." Elliot exhaled slowly, recognizing the unyielding determination in his brother's gaze. You know I've got your back, always, he said, holding the mic up. Where do you want this thing? Inner jacket pocket, Adrian instructed, still focused on organizing the files. It connects directly to my phone. We'll have a full recording. Elliot hesitated, raising a brow. Isn't that illegal? Recording without consent. Not in public spaces where privacy isn't expected, Adrian replied matter-of-factly. I've checked the laws. Elliot gave a reluctant nod, impressed despite himself. You never miss a detail. It's important, Adrian said, tucking a few more papers into a slim folder. This has to go off without a hitch. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Adrian glanced at his watch. That'll be Nina. Elliot raised an eyebrow. Alyssa's friend? She's the wild card in this whole mess. She's undecided, Adrian said as he stood, walking toward the door. I need to gauge where she stands before Friday. When Adrian opened the door, Nina was standing there, looking tense. Her posture was stiff, her eyes widening in surprise at seeing Elliot standing beside Adrian. I didn't know someone else would be here, Nina said, clutching her purse tightly. My brother is just helping out with a few things, Adrian explained calmly. He'll give us some space. Elliot took the cue. I'll be in the kitchen. Coffee, Nina? No, thank you, she replied, her voice tight with discomfort. Once Elliot was gone, Adrian gestured toward the couch. Nina hesitated before sitting, her body tense with anxiety. Alyssa knows we talked, Nina blurted out. She confronted me yesterday. Adrian kept his composure. And what did you tell her? I just told her you had some questions. I didn't give her any specifics. Nina's eyes searched his face. Adrian, I'm stuck. Alyssa's been my friend forever, but what she's doing, it's not right. I'm not asking you to take sides, Adrian said, his voice gentle but firm. This isn't about loyalty to either of us. It's about choosing between truth and deception. Nina shook her head slightly. It's not that simple. It is, Adrian said, leaning in a little. Nina, I'm not asking you to betray Alyssa. She's already betrayed both of us. I'm asking you to stand up. For what's right. You want me to help you shame her in front of everyone? Nina asked, a hint of anger in her voice. She told me about Friday, Adrian said, his voice calm but unwavering. She saw your name on the reservation. She thinks you're following her. So Alyssa had already caught on to the Riviera plan. That spoke volumes. What else did she say? Adrian asked, his voice steady. Nina hesitated, her eyes flickering with indecision. She said you wouldn't understand, that your relationship had been over for years. She said Caleb makes her feel alive again. Adrian remained still, betraying no hint of emotion, though Nina's words sliced through him. So you think that justifies all the lies? Nina's voice wavered. No. But your approach, it feels so cold, so deliberate. What they did, despite its flaws, came from a place of real feeling. Adrian's tone sharpened, causing Nina to flinch, but he quickly composed himself and spoke with controlled calmness. I'm not seeking your participation, just your understanding. This needs to happen. What do you expect from me? She asked, her voice tinged with confusion. Silence. Nothing else. If Alyssa asks, you know nothing. Nina paused, then nodded, albeit hesitantly. I can do that, she added, after a moment of uncertainty. For what it's worth, I never agreed with what she did. Never. And yet you protected her secret? I thought it would stop. I believed she'd come to her senses. Nina's eyes lifted, glistening with unshed emotion. She's making a terrible mistake. Adrian, you're a good man, she whispered softly. He rose, signaling that the conversation had reached its conclusion. Friday changes everything, Nina. Be ready. As she left, Elliot appeared from the kitchen, a knowing look on his face. That sounded heavy, he commented, his voice laced with curiosity. Alyssa knows I'll be at the Riviera. Adrian replied coolly. She's starting to figure things out. Does that change anything? Elliot asked, his tone serious. Adrian paused, his gaze far away, before shaking his head. No. If anything, it might make things more tense. It could even work to our advantage. You're scary sometimes, you know that? Elliot said, half laughing, half impressed. You make it all seem detached. It's not detachment, Adrian corrected, his voice firm. It's control. There's a difference. Elliot nodded thoughtfully, acknowledging the distinction. Need me there on Friday? As backup? No, Adrian replied without hesitation. It has to be just Mira and me, clean execution. Precise, Elliot echoed, moving closer to set a microphone on the desk. All set. The battery's good for 6 hours. He gave Adrian's shoulder a firm squeeze. Whatever happens, remember, we're behind you. After Elliot departed, Adrian stood alone, reviewing the plan one last time. Everything was in motion. Alyssa knew his whereabouts for the evening, but not the reason. Her suspicion was rising. Perfect. Let her think she had the upper hand. Let her feel secure, until it all collapsed. He glanced at his phone. A message from Mira flashed on the screen. Final prep done. You ready? Adrian's reply was succinct and resolute. Absolutely. 2 days left. There was no sense of satisfaction, no surge of emotion, only a calm certainty. A focused resolve, unshaken by the betrayal, surgical in its precision. When Friday evening arrived, Portland was unusually clear. The sunset bathed the city in hues of gold and amber as Adrian stood before his wardrobe, selecting his attire for the night. He chose a charcoal gray suit that Alyssa had once admired, paired with a navy tie. Not for her approval, but to send a message. He was unbowed. His wedding band remained, a silent testament to promises broken, no longer a symbol of love. Another buzz from his phone. Mira's update. In place. She's wearing red. He looks nervous. They're early. Adrian checked the time. 7:30, right on schedule. He drove downtown, every move deliberate, parking in the garage near the Riviera. As he walked to the restaurant, he took the moment to mentally recalibrate, running the plan through his mind again. In his jacket's chest pocket, the microphone Elliot had prepared rested close to his heart. In the inner pocket, a slim folder contained everything necessary to bring down the charade. At the entrance of the restaurant, Lauren Camden greeted him with her usual poise, though a slight edge of concern lingered in her eyes. "Everything's as you requested," she murmured. "Dessert's set up." "Thank you, Lauren. Your discretion is invaluable." She gave a small, respectful nod before leading him into the softly lit dining room. Table 7, as planned. Your guest is already seated. Mira Lawson sat, her elegance cloaked in a sleek black dress that suggested quiet mourning. Her loose curls framed her face, and her makeup was flawless, designed to conceal the storm brewing inside her. She rose slightly as Adrian approached. Her demeanor remained calm, betraying none of the emotional chaos that tonight would unleash. "Right on time," she murmured as he sat. Adrian's eyes scanned the room, quickly locking onto Alyssa and Caleb at a window-side table. Alyssa wore a fitted red dress he hadn't seen before, her hair styled up to expose her neck. Caleb leaned in close, saying something that made Alyssa laugh, a sound that once held so much warmth for Adrian, but now was hollow in his ears. Alyssa hadn't noticed him yet. "Good." "They seem relaxed," Mira remarked, her voice smooth, almost rehearsed. The situation would soon be impossible to ignore. Adrian casually opened his menu and looked at the others. "Shall we begin?" His voice carried the tone of professionalism. They placed their orders for wine and appetizers, taking care to maintain the semblance of an ordinary dinner. Their conversations stayed on track, polite, businesslike, focused on work, as if they were colleagues having a standard meeting. Nothing about their exchange was out of place or suspicious. When the wine arrived, Mira raised her glass, speaking just loud enough for anyone nearby to overhear. "To clarity," she said, with a clear, intentional ring. "And to consequences," Adrian mirrored, gently tapping his glass against hers. The sound caught Alyssa's attention. Her head jerked towards them, eyes widening in surprise. For a brief moment her face went pale, before it shifted into a mixture of shock and fury, perhaps both. Caleb noticed the shift, following her gaze. His reaction was more controlled, but no less telling. He subtly stiffened and forced a smile, speaking to Alyssa in quick, hushed tones. "They've noticed us," Mira commented dryly. "She's rattled." "She'll recover," Adrian replied with quiet certainty. "She always does." As if on cue, Alyssa regained her composure. She leaned back in her chair with exaggerated ease, almost as if trying to convince herself more than anyone else. She whispered something to Caleb before, in an unexpectedly bold move, raising her glass in a mock toast toward them and taking a sip. "Impressive recovery," Mira observed with a slight smile, "though it feels a bit desperate." At that moment, their appetizers arrived, halting their little game for the time being. They ate at a slow pace, fully aware of the occasional calculating glances from the table by the window, but consciously choosing to ignore them. "Feeling nervous?" Mira asked in a quiet murmur. Adrian took a moment before responding, his voice calm. "No," he answered, his gaze steady. "Once I heard that voicemail, it felt inevitable. No second thoughts. Not even tempted to walk away?" She pressed, her voice soft but insistent. "None," Adrian replied, meeting her eyes firmly. "What about you?" Mira gave a slight shake of her head, her expression resolute. "I just want it to end," she stated. As their main courses arrived, the atmosphere in the restaurant became noticeably tense. Alyssa and Caleb continued to play their roles as a couple, but their actions were stiff, clearly rehearsed. Alyssa checked her phone twice, likely for reassurance or guidance, while Caleb drank far more quickly than necessary, signaling for another round. "She's getting bolder," Mira noted, observing Alyssa's laugh, which rang out a little too loudly. "She's trying to make a statement." "Desperation," Adrian remarked, unfazed. "She thinks if she acts unaffected, we'll back off. She doesn't understand you at all, does she?" The question lingered as they continued eating. Adrian found his gaze occasionally drifting to Mira, seeing her in a new light. Her composure, the clarity with which she pursued her goals, it mirrored his own. Under different circumstances, perhaps they could have been allies. "It's time," Adrian said, glancing at his watch. "Are you ready?" Mira took a deep breath, the first hint of vulnerability he'd seen from her. "Yes." Across the room, Mira caught Lauren's eye, giving a subtle nod. Lauren returned the gesture before slipping into the kitchen, likely preparing for the next phase. Alyssa leaned in toward Caleb, their hands intertwined on the table. Despite the closeness of the gesture, it seemed entirely calculated to provoke. Adrian felt the boldness of the move hit him unexpectedly, not because of the intimacy, but because of its sheer audacity. She knew he was watching. This was no accident. Mira noticed it as well. "Now," she said, her voice hardening. Adrian stood, and Mira followed suit. They moved with deliberate confidence toward the window table. When Alyssa saw them approaching, she froze, her smile freezing along with her. Caleb rose to greet them, but Adrian motioned for him to stay seated. "Alyssa," Adrian said, his voice composed. "Caleb, do you mind if we join you?" Without waiting for a reply, he pulled a chair from an empty table and sat. Mira mirrored his actions. "Adrian, what are you doing?" Alyssa hissed, her composed mask slipping. "This is inappropriate." "Inappropriate?" Adrian raised an eyebrow, a dry amusement tinging his voice. "That's an interesting choice of words." Caleb cleared his throat. "Look, man, I'm not interested in what you think, Caleb," Adrian interrupted smoothly, "or in what you feel. Or in the lies you've told yourself to justify your actions? Mira turned to her husband, her voice chillingly calm. Did you enjoy the hotel last weekend? The one charged to our joint credit card? Caleb's face tightened, his discomfort palpable. Mira, this isn't the right time, he said, trying to sidestep the confrontation. Where would be the right time, Caleb? Mira asked sharply. At home? Where you promised loyalty? In the counselor's office you refused to attend? Where exactly do you think we should talk about your betrayal? Alyssa's complexion had gone pale again, her lips whispering a plea. Adrian, please, she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. People are staring. Yes, Adrian replied calmly, his voice unwavering. They are. Witnesses to this moment. Seems appropriate, doesn't it? At that moment, Lauren appeared at their table, holding a silver dish covered with a lid. Your special dessert, as requested, she said, setting it down in the center of the table. We didn't order dessert, Caleb muttered, his confusion momentarily distracting him, the discomfort of the situation briefly forgotten. Lauren gave a small nod, signaling to Adrian and Mira, then retreated. Adrian stepped forward and removed the cover from the silver platter, but instead of a sweet treat, it was filled with a collection of photographs, hotel bills, and printed text message conversations. At the center, a piece of cardboard held a handwritten note, a painful reminder of lost loyalty. Alyssa gasped, instinctively covering her mouth with her hand. Caleb's expression turned dark, his rage evident as he took in the evidence in front of him, the irrefutable sign of their treachery. What is this? He demanded, his voice rising even though they were in a crowded public place. Proof, Adrian answered with cold finality, of lies, betrayal, and deceit. He then directed his gaze to Alyssa. Proof of the end of what we once had. Tears welled up in Alyssa's eyes as she reached out to Adrian. Please, let's talk about this in private. This is cruel. Cruel? Mira shot back sharply. Was it kind to deceive us? To lie to our faces? To steal our trust, our time, our dignity? Adrian added, his voice devoid of warmth. The restaurant had gone silent. Patrons now stared, captivated by the unfolding scene. Adrian felt no satisfaction, only the grim certainty that this moment was long overdue. I've filed for divorce, he said flatly, meeting Alyssa's gaze. The papers will be served Monday. I have everything documented, the affair, the lies, the timeline. There's no point in resisting it. As the weight of his words sank in, Alyssa's tears flowed freely. Adrian, please, she begged. This isn't you. You don't do things like this. You don't know me anymore, Adrian replied, his voice colder than it had ever been. Maybe you never did. As the shock began to wear off, Caleb leaned forward, his tone shifting to one of aggression. You've made your point. Now leave us alone. Actually, Mira interjected, pulling a folder from her bag, we're not done. She pushed several papers across the table toward Caleb. These are financial records from a gym, client accounts you've been siphoning money from for months, methodically, I might add. Caleb's face went pale. That's a lie, he hissed. The investigators didn't think so, Mira shot back. Neither did the police when I filed the report earlier today. Alyssa turned to Caleb, her face a mask of disbelief. What is she talking about? Caleb grabbed her arm, his voice trembling. Don't listen to her. She's lying. Adrian's voice cut through the escalating tension. She's not lying. And you knew, Alyssa. The transfers to your private account make that clear. The panic that overtook Alyssa's face, mixed with guilt, revealed the truth before she could say a word. She was implicated in something far worse than just an affair. I didn't, she began. Save it for the authorities, Mira interrupted, her voice final. The evidence has already been handed over. Caleb stood abruptly, towering over the table. You fucking bitch, he snarled at Mira. You had no right. "Sit down, Mr. Lawson," came Lauren's voice from behind him, where she stood with the restaurant's security guard. "Or I'll have you escorted out." The threat of further embarrassment forced Caleb back into his seat, though his anger simmered just beneath the surface. Adrian stood up slowly, adjusting his jacket. "We're done here," he declared, his voice unwavering. Mira stood beside him, her posture equally dignified. "Enjoy explaining the embezzlement charges, Caleb. I hear the gym's owner is none too happy." As they turned to leave, Alyssa reached out to Adrian. "Adrian, wait. You can't just—" He glanced at her hand, then met her gaze. "Goodbye, Alyssa." The finality in his words made her flinch, as though struck by the weight of the moment. Adrian and Mira walked away, leaving behind chaos. Alyssa's sobs and Caleb's angry muttering filled the air as the reality of the situation began to settle in. Lauren approached them once again. "Was this what you needed?" she asked Adrian in a quiet voice. "It was necessary," he replied. "Thank you for your help." Outside, the cool evening air seemed to erase some of the tension, and they paused in silence as the echo of the confrontation slowly faded away. "Are you all right?" Adrian asked, breaking the stillness. Mira nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Better than I thought." "How about you?" "The same," he replied, extending his hand. "Thanks for your help." She shook it firmly. "We make a good team, Adrian Westfall." "We do indeed," she agreed. Without another word, they parted ways, each stepping into a future now free from deception, yet marked by new challenges. The night felt clearer somehow, as if the truth had swept away some invisible burden. As Adrian walked to his car, the weight of his wedding ring felt heavier than ever before. Tomorrow, it would be gone. But tonight, it remained, an emblem of what had been lost, and of what had been gained in its place. The weekend passed in a heavy, uneasy quiet, with an oppressive stillness hanging in the air. Adrian remained alone in the house while Alyssa was off somewhere, likely with Nina, or more likely, with Caleb. What was once a passionate relationship now seemed doomed by forces much larger than the affair itself. Alyssa called him several times on Saturday morning, but Adrian ignored the calls, letting each one go to voicemail. He listened to her increasingly frantic messages, but he felt a disturbing sense of detachment as he heard her pleas. "Adrian, please, we need to talk. This isn't fair. You caught me off guard with the whole situation with Caleb's finances. I didn't know how bad it really was. You have to believe me." By Sunday, the police were calling him in for questioning. "Adrian, please, I need your help," she begged. Adrian deleted each voicemail after hearing it, making brief notes for his lawyer, feeling only a cold, distant pity for the woman he had once trusted completely. Monday morning, he received a call from Mira. "Have you seen the news?" she asked. Adrian hadn't. Following her suggestion, he checked the local news, and there he found a short but revealing article. Local fitness trainer arrested for embezzling client funds. The piece mentioned Caleb, noting that client money had been systematically drained over the last 18 months. Alyssa's name wasn't mentioned, but Adrian knew it was only a matter of time before that would change as the investigation progressed. "How are you holding up?" Mira asked, concern evident in her voice. Without hesitation, Adrian responded, "The divorce papers are being delivered today. You'd think I'd feel relieved, but it's strange. It's over. No more pretending." They briefly discussed the logistical details, changing locks, splitting assets, and managing the dissolution of what had once seemed like an unbreakable bond. There was an odd comfort in the practicalities of it all, a sense of order in dismantling their shared life. After hanging up, Adrian went to work, trying to act unaffected by the office gossip about the events of Friday night. The rigid structure of the office gave him a welcome distraction from the chaos of his personal life. Around midday, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. He answered quickly. Adrian. Her voice was hoarse, as though she had been crying for hours. They served me the papers at work, in front of everyone, she said, humiliation dripping from every word. That's standard procedure, Adrian replied coldly. She let out a bitter laugh. I guess that was the point. Adrian shut his office door for privacy. What do you want, Alyssa? I just want a chance to explain, to apologize. He responded with calm finality. Neither is necessary. Damn it, Adrian. Her voice cracked as her composure fell apart. 8 years of marriage, and you can just shut down like this? Like I never mattered? Her words stung, but not with guilt, rather with a sharp flash of anger. He let it rise to the surface, allowing himself the rare release. You made your choices, Alyssa. For months, you made calculated, deliberate decisions to destroy everything we built. I made mistakes. No. Adrian cut her off, his voice firm. Mistakes are accidents. You lied to me every day. You came up with intricate cover stories. You knew exactly what Caleb was doing with that money and stayed silent. These aren't mistakes. They're a reflection of your character. There was a long silence between them, broken only by her uneven breathing. Then, in a shaky voice, she spoke again. The police think I was involved in Caleb's embezzlement. Were you? Adrian asked, unable to stop himself. A long pause followed. Not directly. I knew he was doing something with client accounts, but I told myself it wasn't my business. And the money he transferred to your private account? Adrian pressed. It was his commission, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Bonus money, Adrian corrected, his mind spinning from the tangled web of lies. I wanted to believe him. Adrian shut his eyes for a moment, exhausted by the constant deceit. Talk to a lawyer, Alyssa. I can't ask for your help with this. Can't or won't? He asked, his voice devoid of judgment, only a quiet understanding. Both. He replied softly, Goodbye, Alyssa. He ended the call, his mind returning to the screen before him, where the code offered an odd sense of clarity. It was clean, logical, predictable. Everything his life was no longer. There were no hidden motives, no betrayals, only cause and effect. That evening, he met Wesley and Elliot at a quiet downtown bar. It was the first time they'd all gathered since that explosive dinner at Riviera. Wesley arrived first, greeting Adrian with a bear hug, the kind that spoke volumes without a single word. I heard it got intense, Wesley said as he settled into his seat. That's one way to put it, Adrian replied, ordering a scotch. Nina's devastated, Wesley added softly after a pause. Alyssa's been staying with her. I figured as much, Adrian said. She told Nina everything. Caleb, the money, everything. Wesley shook his head. Alyssa says she's going to cooperate with the investigation. She's going to turn on Caleb. Adrian nodded, unsurprised. Self-preservation has always been Alyssa's strongest trait. Elliot entered the room with a friendly pat on Adrian's back before settling into a chair. The star of the evening? He joked, his grin wide, but Adrian quickly waved it off. Not quite, he responded, a hint of modesty in his voice. Oh, come on. You're practically a hero around here, Elliot retorted with a grin of his own. The man who had brought down the corrupt trainer and his accomplice all at once. I didn't do it for recognition, Adrian said firmly. No, Elliot agreed, his expression turning serious. You did it because it was necessary. For a few moments, the trio sat in companionable silence, the background hum of the bar providing a quiet ambiance. So, what's next for you? Wesley asked, breaking the stillness. Adrian took a moment to gather his thoughts before replying. Once the divorce is finalized, I'll focus on my work and maybe do some traveling. Honestly, I haven't really thought beyond just getting through this chapter. You should take a break, Elliot suggested. Give yourself some time to clear your mind. Maybe, Adrian replied, his thoughts clearly elsewhere. The conversation soon veered into lighter topics: sports, Elliot's new motorcycle, and Wesley's recent career advancement. Life seemed to be moving forward as usual, even though Adrian's personal life had been turned upside down. As the evening wound down, Wesley pulled Adrian aside while Elliot handled the bill. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Adrian gave a slow nod. "Better than I expected. Some things feel emptier, but other parts feel more grounded." Wesley studied him for a moment. "You dealt with it the same way you handle everything, calm and calculated." "It's the only way I knew how to deal with it," Adrian said, his voice carrying a sense of finality. Wesley paused before offering his advice. "Just don't let it turn you bitter, all right? Not everyone betrays the people they care about." Adrian gave a small, knowing smile. "I know. You and Nina are proof of that." Wesley hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Speaking of Nina, she wants you to know she regrets not telling you sooner." "Tell her I understand," Adrian replied, his tone even. "Loyalty is complicated," Wesley commented as they prepared to leave. Just then, Adrian's phone buzzed. It was a message from Mira Lawson. "Caleb might bail. He's moving in with his brother for a while. Thought you should know." Adrian showed the message to Elliot and Wesley. "Do you think he's a threat?" Elliot asked, his protective instincts kicking in. "No," Adrian answered decisively. "He's a narcissist, not a fighter. He'll be too focused on saving himself." The three of them parted ways outside the bar, promising to meet up soon. Adrian drove back to his empty house, noticing for the first time that Alyssa had returned while he was out. Some of her clothes were gone, and a cosmetics bag was missing from the bathroom. Her favorite books were gone from the shelf, and the full weight of the situation started to hit Adrian. He moved through the house, opening windows to let the cool night air in, almost as if he were trying to clear the space of any lingering falsehoods. In the bedroom, he took off his wedding ring and placed it in a drawer, out of sight. It wasn't a symbolic gesture of closure. He didn't believe in that kind of thing, but a practical acknowledgement that things had irrevocably changed. The ring no longer represented anything real. As he settled into bed, his phone buzzed again. It was another message from Mira. "Thank you for everything. It's strange, but I feel more like myself than I have in years." Adrian knew exactly what she meant. He replied simply, "Likewise." Her reply came swiftly, strange days ahead, but honest ones. Adrian set his phone down and switched off the light. As he lay in the dark, he realized it felt oddly cleaner than it had in a long time. The storm had passed, and the damage had been done. Now, it was time to rebuild on a foundation of truth, not illusion. For the first time in months, he slept peacefully, without dreams. A week after the confrontation at Riviera, Adrian sat in his lawyer's office, reviewing the proposed divorce settlement. Riley Saunders, an experienced attorney who specialized in high-conflict divorces, explained the terms with her usual precision. "Given the evidence you've provided, Mrs. Westfall has very little chance of challenging anything," Riley said. "Her lawyer is pushing for a more favorable asset division, but we're standing firm." Adrian glanced through the documents, his expression focused. "And my terms, as we agreed, non-negotiable." Riley offered a slight smile. "She keeps her personal accounts, except for anything linked to Mr. Lawson's activities. She forfeits any claim to the house, your retirement accounts, and stock options. She keeps her car, personal belongings, and the accounts in her name that aren't under investigation." "What about the timeline?" Adrian asked. Riley's smile widened just a bit. "She's eager to settle quickly, especially given the ongoing criminal investigation. She's agreed to expedite the process." "Good," Adrian said, signing where she directed. Each signature brought him a step closer to finality. As they finished the meeting, Riley paused. "Mr. Westfall, I've handled countless divorces, Most clients in your position would be angry, even bitter. You've handled this with incredible restraint. Anger clouds judgment, Adrian replied simply. I prefer to maintain clarity. Your clarity has worked in your favor, she remarked. I'll file these today. Adrian thanked her and left the office, checking his phone to find a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. It was Detective Mason Redding from the Portland Police Department, requesting a meeting. Adrian had sent the tip about Caleb's embezzlement from an anonymous and secure email account. He hadn't expected any immediate follow-up, but when it came, he responded swiftly. He picked up the detective's call on the second ring. Mr. Westfall, thank you for your prompt response. Can you make it to the station this afternoon? We have new developments regarding the landing case that you should be aware of. I'm free at 3, Detective Redding said. Without hesitation, Adrian agreed to the meeting. When Adrian arrived at the station, he was struck by the hustle and bustle in the lobby. Officers and civilians hurried past, each one seemingly focused on a specific task. Detective Redding met him by the door. He was of average build, with salt and pepper hair and sharp, observant eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Thanks for coming in, Redding said, guiding Adrian to a small, private conference room rather than an interrogation room. No coffee, thanks, Adrian replied, taking a seat. His usual composure remained, though he couldn't help but feel a rise in curiosity. You mentioned some updates? Redding opened a folder on the table between them, nodding. Let's get straight to it, Mr. Westfall. We know you were the anonymous tipster who provided the initial information about Caleb Lawson. Adrian didn't flinch or deny it. The delivery was anonymous, but the level of detail, both personal and financial, could only have come from someone with intimate knowledge, Redding continued, his gaze fixed on Adrian. And your divorce filing on the same day we received the tip? That raises some questions. Adrian's face remained impassive. Am I in trouble, Detective? Redding shook his head. Not at all. In fact, your information has helped us uncover a far larger case than we initially realized. The detective pushed several photographs across the table, surveillance shots of Caleb meeting with men Adrian didn't recognize. Lawson's embezzlement is just the beginning. He's been funneling money for these people, using the gym as a cover for laundering. Adrian's eyes widened at the pictures. I had no idea. Most people didn't, Redding responded with a shrug. But once we started digging, it all came together. Your wife claims she only knew about the skimmed client accounts, but not the broader operation. And do you believe her? Adrian asked, his voice even. We're still determining her role, Redding replied, his expression unreadable. She's cooperating, providing us with information about Lawson's contacts and movements, mostly, I think, for her own protection. Adrian's judgment was clear. I see. She's facing potential charges, accessory after the fact and financial fraud, Redding added. Less severe than Lawson's charges, but still serious. As Adrian absorbed this new information, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Alyssa's recent attempts to contact him suddenly made sense. She needed his help, or at least his sympathy, as her legal troubles deepened. What exactly do you need from me, Detective? Adrian asked. Context, Redding said. We need a timeline. When did your wife's behavior change? When did the financial patterns shift? When did new people come into the picture? Any details you can provide would be helpful. Adrian shared everything he could, dates, observations, and patterns he had noticed, even if he hadn't fully understood their significance at the time. Redding took careful notes and occasionally asked for clarification. You have a keen eye, Mr. Westfall, Redding remarked as the meeting concluded. Most people wouldn't notice these things. I just notice patterns, Adrian said simply. And when they change, I notice. Just before Adrian stood to leave, Redding asked one final question. You didn't seem surprised by your wife's involvement in Lawson's activities. Did you suspect there was more to their relationship, financially? Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully. I suspected she knew more than she let on. The extent of it, though, that caught us all off guard, Redding commented. Once outside the police station, Adrian sat in his car, taking a few moments to process everything he had just learned. Alyssa's affair had already been a painful blow, the betrayal of their vows. But the realization that she might have knowingly participated in financial crimes painted a picture of her he hadn't known, even after 8 years of marriage. His phone rang, breaking his thoughts. It was Mira Lawson. The police contacted me, she said, her voice blunt. Did they get in touch with you? I just left the station, Adrian replied. It's about money laundering. Mira let out a bitter laugh. Of course, Caleb always wanted more money, more attention, more everything. The legal way was too slow for him. Did you suspect anything beyond the embezzlement? Adrian thought for a moment before answering. Too many unexplained deposits. Too many meetings with men he called investors. There was a long silence on the line before Mira spoke again. I'm selling the gallery, she said, her tone abrupt. Adrian was taken aback. Why? A fresh start, Mira replied, and the conversation ended just as quickly as it had begun. Portland is now a city haunted by its past. I've been offered the chance to join a gallery partnership in Seattle. Do you think that sounds promising? Her voice softened, betraying a touch of emotion. It does, yes. Adrian, I want to thank you. Your approach to everything, how you handled it, gave me a structure when everything around me felt like it was falling apart. We supported one another, Adrian replied, a little surprised at the unexpected bond he'd formed with this woman, someone he'd known so briefly, under such peculiar circumstances. Yes, we did. Mira paused, as if gathering her thoughts. There's one final thing you should know. Alyssa visited me yesterday. Adrian's hand tightened around the phone. Why? She came to ask me to intervene with you. She wants you to help her with a legal matter. She seems to think I have some influence. And what did you tell her? That she made her choices, and now she must face the consequences, just as Caleb must deal with his. Adrian realized her words reflected his own philosophy. Thank you for telling me. We, the unexpected allies, should stick together. Mira's tone brightened. Goodbye, Adrian Westfall. I hope you find peace. You as well, Mira Lawson. As the call ended, Adrian sat in silence, watching the steady stream of people entering and leaving the police station, officers and civilians alike, each carrying their own intricate stories. The twists his own story had taken had uncovered layers of deception that he hadn't anticipated. But oddly, this revelation gave him a sense of closure. The woman he had married, the woman he believed he knew, had never really existed. The realization was strangely liberating. It confirmed that the path he had chosen, the clean break he had made, had been essential. He started his car and drove away from the station, leaving another piece of his past behind. Ahead, there was uncertainty, but also potential. And for now, that was enough. 3 weeks after the events at Riviera, Portland began to settle into early summer. The rain lifted, giving way to sunshine. Trees blossomed with new green leaves, and the city shook off its usual dampness, breathing in fresh energy. Adrian sat at an outdoor table at Riviera, a space now transformed from a battleground into neutral ground. Lauren Camden joined him, placing 2 glasses of iced tea on the table before sitting across from him. The patio looks amazing, Adrian remarked, gesturing to the newly added deck adorned with hanging plants and twinkling lights. Business picking up with the better weather? Better than expected, Lauren agreed, giving him a look of gentle concern. You look a lot better. Much better than the last time you were here. I feel better, Adrian replied, taking a sip of his iced tea. Things are settling down. I hear your divorce is almost finalized, she said. News traveled fast within their circle. Next week, Adrian confirmed. faster than usual, but circumstances sped things up. Lauren nodded, understanding the understatement. Alyssa's increasing legal troubles and the rush to finalize the divorce before a possible criminal trial had removed many of the usual obstacles. The embezzlement investigation had expanded, with Caleb now facing serious federal charges and Alyssa negotiating a plea deal as a cooperating witness. And work? Still keeping you busy? Actually, I've taken a leave of absence. 3 months, Adrian replied. Lauren raised her eyebrows in surprise. You? Taking a break from work voluntarily? That's a surprise to me too, but it felt necessary, Adrian said with a faint smile. Then what will you do with all that free time? Travel, Adrian said. A little. But I also want to talk to you about something. A proposition. Lauren leaned in, intrigued. I'm listening. You mentioned the idea of opening a second location in the Pearl District. It's been a long-term goal, but securing the funding has always been the challenge. Adrian nodded. I'd like to propose a partnership. I'll invest in the venture in exchange for partial ownership. I'd mostly be a silent partner, though I might have a few ideas for the business side. Lauren stared at him, clearly surprised. You want to invest in restaurants? That's unexpected. I want to invest in something tangible, Adrian clarified. Something that builds community, not just profits. Your restaurant does that, Lauren said, then added, but the restaurant business is risky even in good times. I know the statistics, Adrian replied. And you've done your research? Of course, Lauren said with a small smile. Why this? Why now? She asked. Adrian paused before responding. Recent events have helped me clarify some priorities. I've always focused on work, but it's not enough. I need something more. Connection, a purpose beyond just code and software architecture. And you think the restaurant business will give you that? I think it will give me part of it, Adrian said, meeting her gaze directly. Lauren paused, her gaze fixed on the man sitting across from her, as she sifted through her thoughts. Over the years, Adrian Westfall had always exuded an aura of composure, calm, exact, and somewhat aloof. But today, as she observed him, something had subtly changed. The man in front of her still carried that familiar poise, yet he seemed more in tune with the world around him, more present. I'll need some time to think, she said after a brief silence. Come by next week, he suggested. We can go over the figures and the direction we're heading. That seems reasonable, she agreed. They finished their tea in silence, before Lauren finally broached the question that had lingered in the air. Are you all right, Adrian? Really all right? For the first time in all the years they'd known each other, he didn't respond with his usual automatic reassurance. I'm recalibrating, he said, his voice slow and deliberate. Learning to trust my own judgment again, after completely misjudging something so fundamental. You weren't wrong, Lauren replied, her tone firm. You put your faith in someone who turned out to be unworthy of it. He nodded, acknowledging her point, but not entirely agreeing. That's on her, not me, he said, pausing before continuing. Either way, I'm moving on. After leaving the Riviera, Adrian drove to the Pearl District, parking near the Lawson Gallery, now under new management since Mira had relocated to Seattle. The gallery had undergone a rebranding, deliberately cutting its ties to the previous scandal. Yet, as Adrian entered, his attention was drawn to a painting on the far wall, the fractured mirror that he and Mira had once discussed. It still hung there, its shattered reflection now carrying an entirely new significance. He stood there for a while, absorbed in its symbolism. Quite a striking piece, isn't it? Adrian turned to find Wesley standing beside him. It is, Wesley replied. What brings you here? To meet with you, of course, Adrian said, offering a dry smile. Elliot mentioned you wanted to have a chat. Elliot talks too much, Wesley replied with a grin, causing Adrian to chuckle. Let's grab some coffee, Adrian suggested. They settled into a quiet corner of a nearby cafe, where the comfort of their long-standing friendship provided a brief respite from the storm of recent events. Wesley didn't waste any time. "So, here's the deal," he said. "Nina told me Alyssa's agreed to the plea deal. 6 months, maybe less with good behavior." "Best she could hope for, given the circumstances," Adrian said with a nod. "And the house? Sold?" "Closed yesterday," Wesley replied, raising an eyebrow. "Quick work." "Where are you headed now?" Wesley asked, genuinely curious. "I've rented a furnished loft downtown. Short term. It gives me time to figure out what's next." "Like your restaurant investment?" Wesley's tone shifted to skepticism. "Elliot mentioned that too. Since when are you into the service industry?" Adrian shrugged. "Since I realized I needed more than just algorithms and interface design. Midlife crisis hitting early," he said with a smirk. Wesley laughed, though concern lingered in his eyes. "It's evolution, not a crisis," Adrian corrected. "The last few months have forced me to reassess things. I'm just following through." Wesley studied him for a moment. "You're different. Not in a bad way, just not the Adrian I've known for 15 years. "People change," Adrian said simply. "Sometimes it's by choice, sometimes it's by circumstance, and sometimes by betrayal." Wesley's expression softened. "I guess that's true." Adrian nodded, his gaze steady. "I won't let what happened define me, but I won't pretend it hasn't changed me either." "Fair enough," Wesley said, raising his coffee cup in a small toast. "To evolution, then." They spent the rest of their time chatting about lighter matters: Wesley's kids, Elliot's new motorcycle, the approaching blazer season. Life, as it often does, carried on, despite the personal challenges each of them was facing. Just as they were about to leave, Wesley hesitated. "One more thing you should know," he said, his voice lowering. "Nina ran into Mira Lawson last week, just before she left for Seattle. She asked about you. Looked genuinely concerned for how you're doing." Adrian took in this information with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. "We had an unusual connection, one that kept us in touch." Wesley's gaze was neutral, but his words carried a weight. "I hadn't planned on staying in contact with her. Maybe you should." Adrian paused, considering. Then he nodded. "Maybe I will." They parted outside the cafe, Wesley heading home to his family, while Adrian drove to his temporary loft. The space was minimalist, modern and clean, a blank canvas that mirrored his own state of mind. No past, no memories, just an open space for whatever came next. As he sat down at his laptop, Adrian saw an email from Riley Saunders, confirming the date for the final divorce hearing. Another message from Detective Redding requested a follow-up interview about the expanding case involving Caleb Lawson. There was also a third email from a property management company with listings for several Portland neighborhoods. Life, it seemed, was shifting in response to new realities. After responding to the important messages, Adrian hesitated before opening a new email, this one addressed to Mira Lawson. Adrian quickly typed out a brief message, inquiring about the status of the Seattle transition. He didn't linger on the subject for long, shifting his attention toward the expansive loft windows, which framed a sweeping view of the city. Portland spread out beneath him, familiar, yet subtly different. The same skyline, streets, and bridges, but now seen from a novel perspective, offering a fresh vantage point. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a message from Elliot. "Dinner tomorrow? Bringing someone you should meet." Adrian couldn't suppress a smile at his brother's unmistakable attempt at matchmaking. He quickly replied, "Too soon," followed by, "But dinner sounds great." Soon after, another notification pinged, this time an email. Mira had already responded. Her reply was short, but the warmth in her words made him pause. She was adjusting well, she mentioned. The partners at the Seattle Gallery had been welcoming, and she added that the rain there was even more persistent than in Portland. And yes, she wanted to keep in touch. Adrian closed his laptop with a thoughtful exhale, turning his gaze back to the city below. The late afternoon sun spread across the skyline, casting long shadows as the golden light transformed the city's appearance. On the streets below, people moved in various directions, some heading to dinner, others returning home, and some embarking on their evening out. He watched the ebb and flow of lives, interwoven yet separate, and for a moment, a fleeting thought of Alyssa passed through his mind. Where was she now? What was she thinking as the life she had meticulously built unraveled? It wasn't intrigue driven by revenge or satisfaction, but rather a detached curiosity, as if he were watching a story unfold from the outside. She had become a part of his past, no longer the focal point of his story. His reflection in the window stared back at him, unchanged on the surface, but different in subtle ways. The same face, the same calm demeanor, yet his eyes held something new. It wasn't hardness, but a newfound clarity, a quiet determination. He turned away from the window, reaching for the notebook where he had been sketching out ideas for Lauren's second restaurant. Life pressed forward. Not the life he had once envisioned, but perhaps one more authentic, one shaped by the tables you build and those you walk away from. And sometimes, from the wreckage, something new arises, stronger, more genuine, and uniquely yours. As the evening deepened over Portland, Adrian Westfall began to rebuild. Our story has come to an end. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed the way I tell stories, head over to my channel and check out my other videos. May the force be with you. See you soon, my friend.